Hello and welcome to my channel. Before moving on, hit the like button and subscribe and press the bell icon and comment your country. On a serene evening in the vibrant city of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a dark secret was brewing beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary family. A forbidden affair between a dedicated Muslim wife and her father-in-law spiraled out of control, culminating in a shocking tragedy. This secret, which started innocently during family gatherings, escalated into a devastating confrontation that left one man dead and shattered the lives of everyone involved. In 2008, Samira's life appeared flawless from the outside. At just 28 years old, she was a devoted wife and a loving mother of two, residing in Riyadh with her husband, Faisal. Their modest yet cozy home reflected the life they had carefully built together. Faisal was a successful businessman, renowned in their community for his entrepreneurial spirit and constant pursuit of new ventures. His work often required him to travel to neighboring countries, but he ensured that Samira and their children never lacked anything material. Yet, despite their comfortable lifestyle, an emotional void had begun to grow within their marriage. The cracks in their relationship, hidden from the outside world, hinted at an unraveling bond that neither could fully address. Samira had entered into marriage with Faisal at the tender age of 20. Like many traditional unions in their culture, theirs was arranged by their families. In the early years, their relationship thrived on mutual respect and shared responsibilities, creating a solid foundation for their life together. However, as time went by, the warmth and affection that once bound them began to dissipate. Faisal, increasingly consumed by his work, became a distant figure in the household. His business trips extended from a few days to several weeks, and even when he was physically present, his mind seemed perpetually preoccupied with his ventures. Left to manage the household single-handedly, Samira was thrust into the dual role of both mother and father to their children. Despite her best efforts to remain steadfast in her religious duties, her heart grew heavy with an unshakable loneliness. A devout woman of deep faith, Samira held strongly to the roles defined by her religion and culture. She meticulously ensured that her home was immaculate and her children were raised with the utmost values. Yet, beneath this picture-perfect exterior, a void continued to grow in her heart. She yearned for something that material comfort could never fulfill, an emotional connection and companionship that had long since vanished. Most evenings found her sitting alone, staring into the quiet, wondering when Faisal might return. Her thoughts often wandered to the days when their relationship felt alive, before the demands of work had consumed every aspect of their lives. In the early months of 2008, during one of her loneliest periods, Samira found herself increasingly drawn to Amir, her father-in-law. Amir was a man of great influence within the family, a figure highly respected not only by his relatives, but also by the larger community. Despite being in his early 60s, he remained sharp, charismatic, and exuded an authoritative presence that naturally commanded attention. Unlike Faisal, whose focus on work often left him oblivious to the subtle changes in Samira, Amir noticed. He was acutely aware of the growing emotional distance between his son and daughter-in-law, though he never addressed it openly. Over the years, Amir had always shown kindness to Samira, offering his wisdom and guidance during family gatherings. To him, she embodied the qualities of an ideal wife, faithful, patient, and endlessly caring. He admired how she kept the household running smoothly, even in Faisal's prolonged absences. Initially, their conversations were ordinary and fleeting, the kind one might expect between family members. But as time passed, the nature of their interactions began to shift. Amir started finding reasons to linger in her company, seeking her out more often during family events. His gestures remained subtle, ensuring they never drew unwanted attention, but an unspoken connection was forming between them, a bond that neither dared to name aloud. By early 2010, the connection between Samira and Amir had taken a perilous turn, evolving from familial affection to something far more dangerous. The subtle, fleeting glances they once exchanged during family dinners began to linger, holding an intensity that neither could deny. Their conversations grew deeper and more personal, hinting at an emotional closeness that went beyond the boundaries of their relationship. Amir couldn't help but notice how Samira's eyes lit up whenever he paid her a compliment, or how she leaned in just a little closer when they spoke. For Samira, who had long felt neglected by Faisal, Amir's attention was a balm to her loneliness. He seemed to understand her in ways that Faisal never could. Amir listened with a patience and attentiveness that made her feel seen and valued, something she hadn't experienced in years. Despite his age and his respected position within the family, Amir was not immune to the pull of forbidden desire. He recognized Samira's vulnerability and began to exploit it, albeit carefully. He reassured her that their interactions were nothing more than harmless conversations between a father-in-law and his daughter-in-law. But deep down, both of them understood that the line they were treading was anything but innocent. By mid-2010, their interactions became increasingly clandestine. Amir began orchestrating reasons to visit Faisal's home, carefully planning his visits for times when Faisal would be away on business trips. These encounters, concealed behind the guise of family obligations, grew more frequent. Samira and Amir would find secluded corners of the house where they could talk privately, always ensuring they were out of sight of the children or any other family members. Each meeting crackled with unspoken tension, the weight of their forbidden connection pressing down on them. Samira found herself trapped in an emotional whirlwind, torn between the guilt of her actions and the undeniable pull she felt toward Amir. After every encounter, she would resolve that it would be the last, praying for the strength to break free from the cycle. Yet the temptation grew stronger with each secret rendezvous, drawing her further into a web of deceit and desire. Samira's deep faith added an extra layer of turmoil to her situation. She was painfully aware that what she was doing was a grave betrayal of everything she had been raised to value: her religion, her family, and her moral principles. The guilt gnawed at her, but the intense loneliness she endured, coupled with the connection she felt with Amir, seemed to outweigh her religious convictions. Night after night, she lay awake, praying for the strength to resist temptation and pleading for forgiveness. But despite her prayers, the cycle of temptation persisted, pulling her deeper into an emotional abyss. As the months wore on, their secret encounters grew bolder, bordering on reckless. No longer satisfied with the confines of the house, they began meeting in riskier locations, quiet parks cloaked in the fading light of dusk, or deserted corners of the family estate. Both convinced themselves that their secret was impenetrable, that no one would ever discover the truth. But in reality, they had become blind to the subtle warning signs that their actions were leaving behind. Samira's behavior began to shift noticeably. While she tried to maintain the facade of a devoted wife and caring mother, the emotional strain of leading a double life was beginning to take its toll. Her once vibrant demeanor dimmed under the weight of secrecy and guilt, and cracks began to show in the carefully crafted image she projected to the outside world. Although Faisal was frequently away for work, he couldn't ignore the subtle changes in Samira's behavior. She had grown increasingly withdrawn, her conversations with him becoming curt and emotionally distant. At first, he attributed her demeanor to the pressures of managing the household and raising their children. Yet, a faint sense of unease began to take root, a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. By late 2011, whispers of suspicion began circulating within the family. Faisal's younger sister, Aisha, noticed the unusual dynamic between Amir and Samira. During family gatherings, she couldn't help but observe how their glances lingered just a little too long, their interactions seeming uncharacteristically close. Troubled by what she saw, Aisha confided her concerns to Faisal. Initially, he dismissed her observations, refusing to believe that there could be any impropriety between his wife and his father. However, her words planted a seed of doubt in his mind, one that he couldn't entirely shake. As the year drew to a close, the tension between Faisal and Samira reached a boiling point. Faisal's suspicion began to solidify into something more tangible. Though he couldn't bring himself to confront her directly, the uneasy feeling that something was happening behind his back became impossible to ignore. He watched her more intently, noting the subtle shifts in her behavior, yet he hesitated to take action, unsure of how to unravel the web of uncertainty that surrounded him. By early 2012, the situation had spiraled out of control. Samira, caught between the crushing weight of her guilt and the intensity of her emotions, felt herself trapped in an ever-deepening web of lies. Every interaction with Amir felt precarious, like walking a tightrope where a single misstep could send her world crashing down. What she didn't realize was that the cracks in her carefully constructed facade were already beginning to show, and the disaster she feared was closer than she imagined. The affair, once a deeply guarded secret between two people, had morphed into a ticking time bomb, its eventual explosion inevitable. By the summer of 2012, the toll of this double life became undeniable. Samira, weighed down by the burden of secrecy, grew more detached from Faisal. What had started as guilt now manifested as avoidance. She could no longer look him in the eye, knowing that every shared moment was laced with betrayal. Her demeanor changed noticeably. Conversations became strained, and the warmth she once showed Faisal had faded entirely. Samira retreated emotionally, distancing herself from the man she had vowed to love and honor, all the while grappling with the choices that had led her to this breaking point. Although Faisal was often away, he began noticing the subtle but undeniable changes in Samira's behavior. The woman who had once been attentive and fully present in their conversations now seemed perpetually distracted. Her thoughts appeared to wander, far removed from the moment. The warmth she used to show him, even during his extended absences, had all but disappeared. Faisal's suspicions started to grow, though he initially tried to rationalize them. They had been married for over a decade, and he had always trusted Samira without question. But her increasing withdrawal became impossible to ignore. Her presence in the home felt mechanical, routine at best. She no longer shared the little details of her day with him, nor did she greet him with the same eagerness when he returned from business trips. Instead, she seemed detached, retreating to their bedroom early and offering the excuse of exhaustion to avoid meaningful interaction. The once vibrant connection between them had diminished, leaving Faisal grappling with the unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. Though he hesitated to confront the issue directly, the growing distance between them gnawed at his peace of mind. Amir, on the other hand, had grown increasingly bold in his interactions with Samira. The careful secrecy that had once surrounded their affair began to unravel, replaced by a dangerous recklessness. He seemed to find endless excuses to be alone with her, seizing every opportunity during Faisal's frequent absences. For Samira, family gatherings became a source of immense stress as she struggled to maintain her composure while juggling the growing web of lies she had created. Every glance, every whispered word felt like a thread unraveling from the delicate fabric of her double life. Amir, however, seemed completely unfazed. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed his actions were beyond suspicion, emboldened by his conviction that no one could ever uncover the truth. By late 2012, Samira's behavior had become too conspicuous for Faisal to ignore. Fully attuned to the subtle but troubling changes in his wife, he began to watch her with a more critical eye. He noticed how she avoided physical contact with him, her demeanor growing colder with each passing day. Even her laughter during family meals sounded hollow, as though it were merely an act to maintain appearances. Her refusal to meet his gaze when they spoke was especially unsettling. Faisal often caught her lost in thought, staring blankly out of the window, her mind seemingly far away from the life they had built together. The emotional distance between them widened with every passing moment, leaving Faisal grappling with the growing certainty that something deeply wrong was unfolding within his marriage. By late 2013, whispers of suspicion began circulating within the family. Faisal's younger sister, Aisha, who had always been close to him, couldn't shake the feeling that something was off between Samira and Amir. Her intuition sharpened during a family dinner one evening when she overheard a hushed conversation between them. It wasn't just the words that raised her alarm, it was the tone. The way Amir spoke to Samira, with a certain familiarity, and the way she responded with a softness Aisha had never seen before, sent a chill down her spine. Though she lacked concrete proof, Aisha felt a gnawing certainty that something was seriously wrong. That evening, she confronted Faisal, cautiously sharing her concerns. Faisal, unwilling to believe that his wife and father could ever engage in anything improper, dismissed her worries outright. Yet, despite his outward dismissal, Aisha's words planted a troubling doubt in his mind, one he couldn't ignore. In the weeks that followed, Faisal started paying closer attention to the interactions between Samira and Amir. He began noticing how often they would slip away during family gatherings, disappearing for brief but conspicuous moments. What once seemed like innocent exchanges now felt laden with a hidden significance that he could no longer dismiss. By February 2014, Faisal's suspicions had grown into a gnawing certainty. Unable to ignore the signs any longer, he began quietly monitoring Samira's behavior, carefully concealing his intentions so she wouldn't suspect a thing. He observed how she frequently left the house, claiming she needed to run errands, yet her absences stretched longer than necessary. Her phone, once left casually on the table, was now guarded with an unusual vigilance. There were even moments when Faisal walked into a room and found her speaking softly on the phone, only for her to abruptly end the conversation as soon as he appeared. Each of these subtle actions deepened his unease, confirming that the distance between them was not simply a product of time and routine, but something far more sinister. Faisal felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal welling up inside him, yet he chose to remain silent, carefully biding his time. He understood that confronting Samira without concrete proof would only lead to denials and further complications. Still, the burden of his suspicions grew heavier with each passing day, tearing at his emotions. On one hand, he clung to the love he had always felt for his wife, the woman he had built his life with. On the other hand, the growing certainty that she was hiding a devastating secret from him gnawed relentlessly at his peace of mind. The emotional chasm between them had become unbearable, yet Faisal held on to a fragile hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he was wrong. In the middle of February 2014, Faisal finally stumbled upon the undeniable truth. One evening, while Samira was out, his suspicions compelled him to check her phone. What he discovered left him utterly shattered. Messages between Samira and Amir, hidden until now, were laid bare before his eyes. The content of their exchanges left no room for ambiguity. Every word confirmed the horrifying reality. His wife and his father had been carrying on a clandestine affair for years, betraying him in the most unimaginable way. The weight of this discovery hit Faisal like a storm, upending everything he thought he knew about his family. The realization struck Faisal like a tidal wave, pulling him into an overwhelming sea of anger and despair. He sat in stunned silence, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him with an unbearable force. It felt as if the very foundation of his life had crumbled beneath him, as though everything he had believed in was nothing but an illusion. Yet, even in the throes of rage and heartbreak, Faisal restrained himself from confronting Samira immediately. Instead, he chose to wait, letting the painful truth simmer within him. His anger seethed just beneath the surface, but he was determined to confront them both on his own terms, ensuring that his next move would be deliberate and decisive. The emotional bond that once anchored Faisal's marriage had been irreparably shattered, replaced by a smoldering and festering anger. He knew with devastating clarity that nothing in his life would ever return to the way it had been. The betrayal had cut too deeply, leaving wounds that could never heal. But Faisal held his silence, his fury contained, waiting for the right moment to confront Samira and Amir. His home, once a sanctuary of peace, had become a volatile and tension-filled space, a ticking time bomb on the verge of a catastrophic explosion. He knew it was only a matter of time before everything would come crashing down. On the evening of March 6, 2014, the fragile quiet in Faisal and Samira's home was shattered by an event that would alter their lives forever. Faisal, returning home unexpectedly early from a business trip, stepped into the house just after sunset. The atmosphere inside felt unusually heavy, laden with an almost tangible tension. Faisal had grown accustomed to this oppressive feeling in recent months. His long-simmering suspicions had become a constant companion, gnawing at his peace and leaving him unable to feel truly at ease in his own home. But on this particular evening, the unease in the air seemed different, charged, foreboding, and pregnant with the weight of an imminent revelation. As Faisal set his briefcase down, the eerie silence in the house caught his attention. The children were spending the night at his sister's home, leaving the house unusually still. Yet, it wasn't completely empty. He could hear faint, muffled voices coming from the guest room, a space usually reserved for his father during visits. Faisal's heart began to pound, his long-standing doubts surging to the forefront of his mind. Slowly and deliberately, he moved toward the door, his steps silent as he strained to make out the voices. With each step, his thoughts raced through countless scenarios, but deep down, a painful certainty had already taken hold. He knew what he was about to uncover, and the truth threatened to break him. When Faisal reached the door, he noticed it was slightly ajar. Hesitating for a brief moment, he peered inside, and what he saw made his breath hitch in his throat. There, in the dimly lit room, were his wife Samira and his father Amir, locked in an intimate embrace. Time seemed to freeze as Faisal stood paralyzed by the scene before him. The nightmare that had haunted his thoughts for months had become a devastating reality. His worst fears, the suspicions that had gnawed at his soul, were confirmed in an instant, and in the most unbearable way imaginable. The betrayal struck Faisal like a blade, cutting deeper than he could have ever imagined. This was not just the betrayal of his wife, it was also the ultimate betrayal from his own father. The dual sting of such disloyalty overwhelmed him completely. Before his mind could fully process what he had seen, his body reacted instinctively. A surge of uncontrollable rage overtook him, and he stormed through the door, confronting them head-on. His voice, once calm and composed, erupted with unbridled fury, shaking the room. The sight of Amir, the man who had raised him, entwined with Samira, was more than Faisal could bear. His thoughts spiraled into a haze of humiliation, anger, and heartbreak, consuming him in a storm of raw emotion. Samira recoiled in shock, her face draining of color as she tried desperately to explain. But her words were swallowed by the storm of Faisal's unrelenting anger. The confrontation escalated with frightening speed. Faisal's world had shattered in a single moment, and the sheer intensity of his rage was impossible to contain. Years of bottled-up emotions now spilled out uncontrollably, fueling his actions. In his fury, Faisal's eyes darted around the room, landing on the nearest object, a decorative knife that had hung on the wall for years. Once a cherished symbol of family heritage, it now became an instrument of destruction, its presence chillingly redefined in the chaos of betrayal. Without a second thought, Faisal lunged at Amir, the decorative knife clutched tightly in his hand. He stabbed him repeatedly, each thrust fueled by the searing pain of betrayal and the torrent of rage that had been festering for so long. Every strike felt like an outlet for the overwhelming emotions that had consumed him. Amir, once a commanding figure of strength and authority within the family, collapsed to the floor under the force of Faisal's attack. Blood quickly pooled around him, staining the carpet The enormity of his actions bore down heavily on Faisal, but the flames of his anger had not been fully extinguished. In his mind, the true culprits were Samira and Amir, the very people who had betrayed him in the most intimate and unforgivable way. Their actions, he believed, had pushed him to the breaking point. As the case went to trial, the courtroom transformed into a theater of raw emotion. Every sordid detail of the affair was laid bare, exposing the scandal to the community in excruciating detail. The revelations shocked everyone, tarnishing the family's once untouchable reputation and leaving an indelible mark on their legacy. Although Faisal was undeniably guilty of murder, many saw him as a man who had been driven to his breaking point. His pleas for leniency under Sharia law were carefully considered, with the court acknowledging the intense emotional torment that had propelled him to commit such a heinous act. In the end, the court showed mercy. Faisal's sentence was reduced to 15 years in prison, a punishment that balanced the gravity of his crime with an understanding of the profound pain and betrayal that had consumed him. It was a judgment that reflected both justice and compassion, though it did little to undo the devastation left in the crime's wake. Samira's fate, however, was far more severe in the eyes of the court. She was viewed as the true catalyst for the tragedy, a woman whose betrayal of her husband and family had set the stage for the horrific events that followed. Her role in the affair was seen as the root cause of the violence, and her actions were judged harshly. Initially, Samira was sentenced to death for her part in the scandal. However, her life was spared thanks to Faisal's unexpected plea for mercy. Despite having every reason to despise her, he could not bring himself to condemn her to such a final punishment. Moved by Faisal's plea, the court reduced Samira's sentence to 10 years in prison, leaving her to confront the heavy consequences of her choices behind bars. Despite Faisal's act of mercy, their marriage was beyond repair. The fragile bond they had once shared had been completely destroyed, leaving no possibility of reconciliation. Samira, once respected as a devoted wife and mother, now bore the full weight of her actions. Her reputation, carefully built over the years, was permanently tarnished. The community, which had once admired and supported the family, turned its back on her. Samira was widely regarded as the catalyst for the tragedy, a woman whose betrayal had not only led to the loss of one life, but had torn an entire family apart. She became a symbol of disgrace, isolated from the very society she once sought to uphold. The family, once a respected pillar of the community, lay in ruins. Amir's death, the scandalous affair, and the violent murder had torn them apart, leaving deep, unhealable scars. The tragedy marked the end of their legacy, replacing their once proud name with whispers of shame and betrayal. Though Faisal was spared the death penalty, he would spend the rest of his life burdened by the weight of his actions. The memory of what he had done and the betrayal that drove him there would haunt him endlessly. Samira, too, faced a grim fate. Imprisoned and separated from the world, her children, and the life she had painstakingly built, she was left alone with the crushing burden of her choices and the devastation they had caused. In the end, their story became a grim, cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the devastating power of betrayal, unchecked desire, and uncontrollable rage. What was once a family bound by tradition, love, and respect had been reduced to nothing but a shattered memory, broken beyond repair. The tragedy that unfolded on the evening of March 6th, 2014, would leave an indelible mark on all who had been touched by it. for Faisal, Samira, and their children, the events of that fateful night would linger as a haunting shadow, a reminder of lives forever altered by choices that could never be undone. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe and hit the like button. Comment your favorite part in the video.